finale of The Bachelor, 4 frameworks remain, but only one will get the final rose. React, CodeIgniter, Laravel, and custom build your own framework. Laravel, CodeIgniter, React, you all have been really good to me, but personally, I can do better. Custom framework, do you accept this rose? What's up everyone, and welcome to Website from Scratch Part 1, where we are going to select and set up a framework for our website. The website we are going to be building throughout this series is a coin flip website where users can log in, flip coins, and keep track of their stats, like how many times the coin landed on heads versus tails, or how many times they called the correct side. But all that is for a future video. This video is about selecting and setting up a framework so we can start coding our website in the next video. The name for our website is going to be called Flippy Coins. For this website, we are going to use my very own MVC framework, IR Coding. We are using my framework so we can get a better understanding of how MVC frameworks are structured and work. I coded this framework from scratch, so check out my YouTube video on my channel. If you are starting a big project, I would recommend using a well-established framework that fits your needs. My framework does not have all the bells and whistles like the big frameworks. It is more for learning the basics. However, it works, it is lightweight, and for the setup, all you have to do is check out the repo into a folder and it will work. I'm going to head over to ircoding.com. Click on the GitHub link, and I'm going to copy the repository right here. Over in my command line, I'm going to do a git clone. I'm going to paste that link to my repo, and we are naming this website Flippy Coins. And we have checked out my IR coding framework into the folder Flippy Coins in my WAMP ww folder. Now, I did say that this framework works right out of the box, so let's hop over to our web browser and go to localhost/flippycoins. And we see our framework that we just checked out. It should look just like the website ircoding.com. We're up and running with our framework. First thing I'm going to do over in my www Flippy Coins folder is delete some of the framework specific stuff that we won't need, such as the README, the IR coding SQL dump, and the .git. Then we're going to open and edit our index file. Right out of the box, it comes with a bunch of defines set up here in the index file. We're going to take these defines, we're going to move them outside of our repository. That way we can set this site up on any server and easily modify that defines file. We're going to place this file inside of our WAMP64 folder, 2 folders up. If you don't already have an includes folder here, create an includes folder and open that up. Inside of our includes folder, we're going to create a PHP file called flippycoins_global_include. The first thing to do is get this file included into our index file so we have access to all the defines. So here we're going to do an include. Now we've included the file, it's going to have all of our server specific defines in it. We can start transferring over some of these defines. Going to take our environment variable here and place it right here at the top. Copy over the protocol, copy over our path to host. Base URL will be next, and we're going to update this to be path to host dot backslash dot site name dot backslash. In our case on localhost, it's just going to turn out to be localhost/flippycoins. That's our base URL. We're going to copy over our assets path, which is the path to our assets for our site, which is things like the JavaScript files, the CSS files, and any images. Next, we're going to copy over our use database define, and we will be using a database for this website. So we're going to update that from false to true. Now, in the case of true here, we have to specify the database credentials in order to connect to the database, which gets used right here. We have our load database, it's going to be true, and so then we have to pass along some credentials. So we're going to create a database creds array over in our includes file. We're going to be targeting our local host. It's going to use our root username with no password on our WAMP, and our database is going to be called Flippy Coins. The next thing we're going to do is set our session. Our session name is just going to be our site name, which in this case is Flippy Coins, and we also need to define that. Up here under our environment, a good place to define our site name. We've got site name Flippy Coins, and we're going to use this define over here as our session name. And after we get the name, we do session start. Now we have access to the PHP session. Environment stuff is going to be the same. Here, if you set it to development, we get the error reporting. If we set it to production, we get no errors. Next, we have our autoload params, our use database, which we set to true over here. And we're going to use our database creds right here in place of this blank array. Then we have our default controller and our default method. If we don't specify anything in the URL, what do we want to default to? In our case, we're going to create a home controller, and we can default to the index method for that home controller. That's just fine. Then we create our router, the router params, and the router takes care of everything else, directing the user to that controller, that method, and finally displaying the view. Now we're going to create our database over in phpMyAdmin. Click on Databases and type in Flippy Coins. Click Create, and our database has been created. We don't have to do anything else because we're not going to be actually using the database in this video. That's for future videos where we'll be adding tables and querying the database. Next, we're going to create our home controller. The controllers live in the app controllers folder. Here you see the IR coding controller that came with the framework. We're going to copy that over and we're going to name it home. Here's our home controller. We have to update the class name to be home, and it extends controller, which lives in the core controllers folder, which is a core part of the framework. And we have our index function, and we're going to get rid of all of this default framework functionality and just do a die. Pull back up our web browser here, and instead of refreshing this page here, we should default to our home controller since we updated the default controller in our index file to be home. There we go. We see our welcome home message. Now we're going to create a default template for all of our views. Back in our app folder, we're going to go into the views. Here you see we have the IR coding folder, which came with the framework. I like to have a view folder for each of the controllers that I create. So we are going to create a home folder here that's going to contain all the stuff for the home view. But before we do that, we're going to create a default view template, which basically takes in each of these folders. That way you can add things globally to all of the views. Create a templates folder right here. Inside here, we're going to create a default folder. This will be our default template. Inside here, create a html.php file. So we're going to begin with our basic HTML structure. Specify some meta tags here, just so it looks good on mobile. And we're going to specify a Google font. Next, we're going to specify our template CSS, which will be global CSS because it will always be loaded on every view. Along with our global CSS, we're going to have some global JavaScript for our template. Now let's create our CSS and our JavaScript files for our template. Here's our base URL assets, which is leading us to our app assets, and here you see our CSS and our JavaScript folders. Let's go ahead and create the CSS one first. Inside of our CSS folder, we're going to create a new folder. We're going to call it templates, just like we did for our view. We're going to have a default, and then in here we're going to place our CSS file. I'm going to create a global.css file right here, and I'm going to open that up. Now we're not going to put much in here because we're just getting the framework set up for use when coding our website, but let's at least style up the body so we can see that this is being included. We're going to give it a dark background. We're going to include our new font that we just included from Google, Coda, color of white, no margin, and a font size of 12. Next up is our JavaScript file. Back in our assets file, our JS folder, again, a new templates folder. Inside that folder, create a default folder. And then in here, we're going to create a global.js file. In here, we're going to create a global variable flippy coins. That's going to be an object. This will be loaded on every single page, so we will have access to it. In here, we're going to store the base URL in case we need to use it in any JavaScript like AJAX calls or whatnot. We're going to check if it's mobile, default to false, and then we're going to have our initialize function. Take in some params, and all we're going to do in our initialize function is set our base URL, and our is mobile. Now all we need to do is call the initialize function on this variable. And that is our JavaScript file. Back in our template HTML, I'm going to include jQuery right here before our script. And then we're going to go ahead, open up another script tag, and on page load, we're going to do an initialize on our flippycoins object. I'm going to call flippycoins.initialize. Initialize takes in two parameters like we defined. We have our base URL, and we have our is mobile. We're going to create a new defined for our base URL in our defines file, which we're going to use just like it says for href in A tags and directing users to different pages on our site. Over in our HTML head, then we can echo that out, and our base URL is set. Then I'm going to define a variable for the breakpoint to determine if it's mobile or not. And we're going to set this to 1200. So below 1200, we'll make it mobile. If it's above 1200, it won't be mobile. To determine if it's mobile, we just do the window.width, and if it's less than the breakpoint, it's mobile. Otherwise, it's not mobile. Now I'm going to move on to creating the actual view for our home page. App, views. Now we're going to create a home folder, home. Open that folder up. In this folder, we're going to create two PHP files, HTML body and the HTML head. The HTML head will contain any JavaScript you would like to put in the head of our template here. We're going to spit that out at the bottom of the head, just like that. Now, how that happens is this variable will be defined in our home controller. We're going to define data, HTML head, and we want to get the HTML from that view that we just created. And we're going to call our model function getViewHTML, where you specify the folder path to the snippet you want to load, and then you pass in an array of data. How this framework is set up is anything you put in this data array will be converted to a variable when it gets to the view. That's why this HTML head here is in their data array, but in the template over here, it is a variable. So now any head specific stuff for the home view will be loaded in our global template right here. Delete that die out of there. Now we're going to do the same thing for the HTML body. In this HTML body, and we're going to get the home/HTML body file. And again, we have to echo out our body HTML. So we're going to do HTML body. Throw a heading in here so we know our home view is loading. Then we're going to add one more thing to our global template, and that is our title. Just like these, we're going to echo this out inside of the title tag. With our home view all set up to be loaded into our global template, all we have left to do is call our load view function. Our load view takes in the template we want to use and the data associated with that template. In our case, we have our templates default HTML, which is this file right here. We're going to convert all of our array keys in our data to variables and echo them out. If we refresh our page over here, we should see a dark background and it should display home view. And there we go, we've done it. So that gives you kind of an idea of this template system where we have a global template that takes in the different views. That way, if you wanted to add something globally to every single page, for example, a script, you would just add another script tag right in here and all of the pages would get that script because they're all going to be using this default template. And you can also create multiple templates. You might have a default template, you might have, template 1, 2, 3, because they might serve different purposes. Now I am going to include this file, the global defines, in the repository just so you guys have a template to go off of, because if I didn't include it in the repository, you would have no way to get it. I create no repo files here, and I'm going to replace that global include inside of there. And like I said at the beginning of this video, take that outside the repo and update the include up here accordingly. Well, that's going to wrap up this video. We have selected a framework, installed it, set it up, we even did some coding, templating to make life easier for us going forward when we want to create new pages for our website. Hit that subscribe button, leave a like, leave a comment down below, and let me know what you want to see coded up next. I'll catch you later.